This podcast is certified fresh. Freshmediaworks.com.
Welcome to the American Small Business Spotlight Show. I'm your host, Chris Daly, and each episode I spotlight one small business in America that's doing something cool, something that I feel, hey, you should know about. My next guest is a gentleman that is truly an American story. He discovered something that I didn't even know was needed. Yeah, apparently water storage tanks need cleaning. I will introduce you to Andrew Cwikla with CleanTanks.
This episode is brought to you by Fresh Media Works, the experts in podcast marketing. Get your message in front of your target audience and get more customers. Contact Fresh Media Works today at 713-269-4620 to learn more.
All right, everybody, join me in welcoming Andy Cwikla from CleanTanks to the show. Andy, how are things going today?
I'm good, Chris. How y'all doing over there?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I want to talk all about CleanTanks, but I like to start out by saying, hey, where did you grow up? How did you develop?
So it's a funny story. I grew up in Connecticut, and I had a grade school friend that got a job down here running the Circuit of the Americas racetrack.
Wow.
And I grew up a large Formula One fan since I was a kid. And I got a chance to come down to Texas for 3 or 4, maybe 5 races for a few years. And fell in love with Texas. And I was formerly a financial planner, like a Wall Street type of guy. So I sold my third of the business to my 2 business partners and packed up all my stuff and bought a one-way ticket to Texas in 2016. And here I am 8 years later, loving the great state of Texas.
I love it. The saying is, I wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I could, right?
And I'll be buried here.
I love that. I love that. So how did that segue into, from being a Formula One fan to being a CleanTanks owner?
So how we got started was basically I was hanging out with my father-in-law on his back deck one day about 5.5 years ago, and he has been a plumber in the Dripping Springs, Driftwood area for about 25 years. And the problem arose from a need. He would go over to their house to change out their filters in their well house or, change out the bulb in the UV light. And people would be like, hey, Jim, how come the filters you put in a little while ago, they lasted me 6 months at a time, and now they're only lasting 3 weeks, and I got to put a new one in, and they're super expensive. What's going on? And he would tell them, you have a lot of sediment and a bunch of dirt and organic material built up on the bottom of your collection tank to the point where it's reaching the intake. Every time you turn the water on, it's going to suck some dirt into the intake. And that's why your filters are fouling out, 90% faster than they normally would. So the next question from the customer was, well, hey, Jim, can you clean my water tank for me? And he's like, no, ma'am, no, sir, that's not what we do. So we can maybe come up with a solution for you. So we sat down one day and we're like, hey, we got to start a company. And he's like, Andy, you should do it. You're new here and everything, get established and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So me and him kind of built like a prototype system, and he had a 1,500-gallon tank at his house, and naturally it was dirty because every water tank is dirty. And we tried the system on his, and we were just shocked at how well it worked and the results and everything like that. So we went down to the city hall, or I did, and got the little business license, for 10 years, and here we are 5.5 years later, just trying to help people keep their water clean.
Nice. And the thing that shocked me when we first met was I had no clue how dirty these things get. Explain that for people who think, oh, it's this nice, whether it's a nice shiny one or a nice plastic one, it looks pretty sealed.
Yes, correct. So there's two types of collection systems. There's the rainwater roof collection system, and then there's a well water collection system. So we can start with the rainwater. The rainwater obviously has, the gutters, a full metal roof, most of the time over a couple thousand square feet, and all of the organic material in the air, will collect over time on the roof. Pollen, dust, leaves will get into the gutters. The little tassels that come off all the wonderful cedar trees that we have around here will get in there. And the organic material, along with the dirt, settles to the bottom of the tank. And if it's a light dusting or whatever, that's not a big deal. But when you get to the point where it's an inch or two deep, it becomes a bed to harbor bacteria and other, parasites and everything. And especially here in Texas, when it becomes summertime and the water inside the tank is warm, it gets exceptionally bad when it comes to that stuff. So you basically want to keep that sediment bed that is, at the bottom of the tank just a dusting. That's why we recommend you clean your tanks every 3 or 4 years to keep that, bed from growing so that stuff can't grow on bare plastic or the bare liners that are in the, corrugated tanks, the larger ones some people have. And on top of that, not to sound, gross or anything, we do pull a lot of, dead animals out of the tanks, squirrels, mice, lizards, basically anything you can think of that's small enough to fit in there, birds and things like that. So a lot of tanks we do clean have, floating dead bodies in there, if you want to put it that way, or what we like to call the squirrel soup. And you're going to want to remove all that. And, granted, I know you have your filters and your UV light, and that would handle, most of the stuff where you're not going to get super sick off of it. But, in my tank, I certainly don't want dead squirrels and everything floating in there for my family to, consume that type of water. And then on the well side of things, the wells are a pretty closed system. We don't see as many, organic, life forms in the well systems. But the thing with the wells is since they're so deep, around here it's averaging 500-700 foot for a well. It sucks up all that crushed limestone and that lovely red iron-rich dirt that we have out here in Texas. And the well tanks pretty much constantly pump sediment into the tank every time you use the system. So we kind of recommend you do those a little more often, maybe every 2 or 3 years. And the main thing with the well can still have, the bacteria growth, but it's a little less because it's coming from so deep underground and not, living creatures that are above ground that get in there. But the well ones accumulate the sediment much more quickly, so it reaches that 3-inch intake, much faster. And the crushed limestone and all that stuff that's coming from the underground really, wreaks havoc on your filters and your pump and everything like that. So, basically just like, changing your oil in your truck every, 3,000 or 5,000 miles, you got to have these tanks cleaned so the pumps continue to work properly. You're not changing your filters every 3 weeks, and, you have the cleanest water possible.
So has this revelation to homeowners, has this caused them to rethink having the tanks? No,
not at all. Actually, the rainwater quality is so far superior to, any well quality stuff that you have or any city water that you're going to get. So people love the rainwater for, the softness of it and everything like that. So it's basically just, trying to make customers aware. A lot of them don't know, and they're not told when they get their rainwater system. They're like, hey, you got to clean this every few years, just like you got to do maintenance on anything else in your house. They're just never told. So, it's not their fault. So that's why we're trying, here to get the message out to everybody like, hey, if you have a rainwater system, you really need to maintain that like you would maintain anything else you have on your property.
Got it. And talk about that cleaning because, first impulse, I think, Well, if my sink is dirty, I drain the water, I wash the sink. But
Correct.
you don't want to drain that water, do you?
No, we absolutely not, especially with the, last summer of weather we had and everything like that. Hopefully that changes here. But we designed a system that is a wet system that is completely green. We don't use any chemicals or anything like that. It's a high horsepower vacuum system with a valve on the end of it that we can regulate the outflow so we can get the perfect balance of suction and, losing as little water as possible. So what we did is we use a high horsepower pump and hoses and things like that, and we pop it into the tank and we suck all of the sediment off of the bottom and we shoot it out. Usually we water people's oak trees with it or whatever they'd like to have put in the garden and stuff like that, because believe it or not, the rainwater stuff, even though it's bad for people, that sediment is really good, like compost type of stuff. We've had customers have a shoot in their gardens and everything like that. So we and there's no damage to any of the tanks. We made sure that we met with all the tank manufacturers, Pioneer, Contain, Harvest, Rain, and Dripping, to go over, the liners and to make sure the equipment we were using won't damage the liners. So we have, nylon brushes that are soft but still get the job done very well. And, when we're done cleaning the tank, if it hasn't been, 10, 20 years since you had it cleaned and you have, exorbitant amount of buildup, we can usually get the tank completely clean with only about a 10 or 20% water loss.
Nice. And do you partner with any of these tank installers? Because I would imagine you get people who say, hey, I'm interested in a tank. What can I do?
Correct. We always have customers when we go to their house to clean ask us for referrals. Hey, I want to put another tank here. I want to make my system a little larger, be able to hold some more water. So we do partner with a bunch of companies. Mainly, we're partnered up pretty soon here with Hill Country Rainwater, which is right out of Wimberley here as well. And we do have some connections in Dripping Springs for tank manufacturers. And, we can point you in the right direction if you want a galvanized metal tank or a small plastic, well collection tank, which most people have, the 2,500-gallon ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
nice.
It's a little family network of rainwater specialists here in the Hill Country.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned Wimberley. For people who, maybe in other states, tell them about Wimberley, the Hill Country, and why this is such a hotbed for rainwater collection.
Well, I believe it was due to the fact that a gentleman named Mayor Richard, probably about 20 years ago, began building the 10,000-gallon fiberglass tanks that you see a lot around here, like at Dreamland over in Dripping Springs on 290. So that, I believe, is where the start of where all this came from. Don't quote me, but I think he is the original pioneer. And I believe it just so happened that, this is where he lived. And since then, the Hill Country is ground zero for rainwater collection, I believe, in the United States. My last check, we had over 15,000 tanks here in the Hill Country.
Wow. And what about your area of service? How far is your range?
So we are the only company, as far as we know, in America that cleans tanks like this. And we have gotten calls from Louisiana. We've gotten calls from Northern California. We get calls from West Texas. So, we're willing to go anywhere to help somebody out. But if we have to get on a plane, it's going to be difficult because we can't bring our equipment with us. So it would basically just be, anywhere we can drive to where the customer is willing to, pay a little extra expense to have us come and, stay overnight at a hotel or something like that. We go anywhere, but our main area is probably about 3 hours, circle around Wimberley. So we're going up to Valente this afternoon. We do Spicewood, Lakeway, down to Spring Branch, Bernie, everywhere around here we can get to within like a 1-day drive. And
I guess for the audience, just so they know, Wimberley is just southwest a little bit of Austin, so right in the center of Texas.
Right about 45, 50 minutes southwest of Austin, correct.
Got it.
Probably about halfway in between Austin and San Antonio.
Perfect. Cool. And then do you offer any other services, or is this it? We're experts at cleaning the tanks.
Well, yes, we are experts at cleaning the tanks. We have done other things as well. We have done some roof work, as in we had one customer that had a really bad organic problem to the point where the trees around their house was creating a blue film on the top of their tank. It almost looked like an oil slick. So we did offer to clean their roof to get all that stuff off of there, the metal roof and everything. But for, the general public out there, we are basically just a company that cleans water tanks. We don't try to get into anything else. We like to stick to what we do best.
Nice. And how can people find out more about you?
So they can go to our website. It is CleanTanks, short for Texas.com. And they can always give me a call at 512-806-3322. I'll happily chat with any customer that has any questions or anything regarding their system. And or you can come down to Wimberley for the weekend and enjoy our beautiful town and probably run into us down here as well.
Oh, I love that. That's a great offer right there to come enjoy Wimberley because it is such a treat.
It is a wonderful town. I'm very blessed to be able to live here.
Excellent. Well, Andy Cwikla, thank you so much for helping educate people on what a big need this is and then sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Chris, for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure. And again, thank you for giving me the platform where I can try to help people get educated on how to properly maintain their water tank system.
Hey, I want to thank my guest as always. I also want to thank you, the listener, for giving me and giving these entrepreneurs what I consider the most important gift ever, your time, your attention. Please go out and support these guys. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business owner, and you want to get your story out there, reach out to us because we love telling these great stories. Until next time, I'm Chris Daly, reminding you, support small business and keep it real.
To learn more about how Chris can help your company get more customers, call 713-269-4620 or visit us on the web at freshmediaworks.com.